Well, hello. Welcome to another Transform Your Ear live. Before we get started and I introduce my guest that I have for today, please put in the chat where you're from, where you're watching from, say hello. And also, as we're talking through this, please feel free to ask any questions you want in the chat, and we will more than likely get around to answering them today. But for today, we are going to be talking all about rhythm, what it takes to become a really good rhythm player, what are some misconceptions or mistakes people make about rhythm. And to talk about it, I have an incredible guest with me who is an expert guitar teacher and an expert in this field. I've got Brian Fish. Hey, Brian, how you doing today, man?
Great, Dylan. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to see you. I'm excited for today, where I want to ask you a ton of questions about this and see how you go about it with your students and what you do. But I think a first question to go through is what are some common mistakes people make when practicing rhythm or some misconceptions that people have about rhythm?
I think the biggest misconception is that you're either born with a sense of rhythm or you're not. And anyone can develop a sense of rhythm. Um, and what goes along with that, as far as the big mistake they make, is that they take on too much at a time. They're trying to learn everything at once. Whereas if you break rhythm into smaller sections and smaller steps as you learn it, and then work on just slowly combining those things, you can play really, really advanced rhythms. And it's not going to take you a long time to do that. But everyone's trying to learn everything at once. Um, and not only the rhythm aspect of it, they're trying to learn the rhythm, the fingerings, the motions, for both hands all at the same time. And a lot of times they're trying to do it close to at speed. And it's the way people approach, honestly, practicing the guitar in general that is the issue. But if you don't have that really solid sense of rhythm, the other things become much harder because it's just one more thing you're having to think about. Um, and too many people rely on the let me just hear it one more time and I'll imitate it thing. So you're never really internalizing, you're never really feeling what you're supposed to be doing, and you're just doing your best to imitate someone else, and you're just always going to struggle if you do that. So have you found that with your students as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when people are trying to learn something, a big common mistake, like you just said, is just taking on way too much at once. And then you feel like, well, why can't I get it? It's because you're focusing on like five things: the finger positions, the rhythm, the pick direction, all these different things, right? But I completely agree with you that a huge misconception is you have to be born with this. Like that's really true for any skill. Is a lot of people think, well, in order to have a really good ear, you need to be born with it. To be really musical, you need to be born with the talent, and it's just not true. It's a skill. It's a muscle that can be trained. But for people that do have more of a challenge, that it doesn't really come that natural, what are some great ways that and tips that people can train their rhythm in isolation to start developing that sense of rhythm?
Okay, step number one, and this is really simple. So most people just kind of overlook this as a basic thing that anyone could do, and it's really not true. Is when you're listening to music, can you tap your foot along to it? Are you keeping time? Um, People who struggle with rhythm, I'll sometimes just ask them that, and they're not really. Some people just aren't sure what they're listening to. So you just need to know that. I mean, in popular music, it's going to be in mostly in 4/4, might be in 3/4, might be in 6/8. Okay, but if it's in 4/4, the most common one, as the beat's going, can you literally just start tapping your foot? Okay, and if you happen to be of the age where you have little kids, make a game out of it. Can the whole family march in time? Okay, no one else needs to know that you're practicing rhythm. You're entertaining them at the same time. Okay, can you do that? That is the most basic thing that you need to be able to do. And then beyond that, you need to then have a way of counting rhythms. And it can be as simple as starting with, can I play a whole note? I mean, whole notes are easy for a lot of people, but there's also many songs that that's the perfect thing that you're going to play. So as you're counting and tapping that foot, 1, 2, 3, 4, can you only play 1, 2, 3, 4? You come in right on that one. Okay, it's not slightly before, it's not slightly after. You need to know exactly where that one is at and hit it. And then we just start building from there. I mean, we from that little foundation there, we can get to really complex rhythms. But if people skip that first step of just even feeling and understanding where the beat's at, you're going to really struggle. Because I've had many people come in struggling with their strums, and they're doing, some crazy things, like they're trying to strum the vocal line on their guitar and wondering why it doesn't sound right. And it's just a matter of, you just need to learn what you're listening for. So is that the type of answer you're looking for there, Dylan? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Just breaking it down to its simplest form. Can you tap the beat? Can you hold a whole note? And everything is fantastic. Exactly what I tell all of my students too. One thing too is, when do you think it's a good idea for people to start practicing in different time signatures? Because like you said, 4/4 is the most common. The majority of everything we do is going to be in 4/4, depending on the type of music. But when do you think it makes sense for people to start, okay, now I should start practicing 3/4, 6/8? Is it right away? Does it not matter? Does it depend?
as soon as you understand the beat and can count, I would start practicing in different things as soon as possible. And it depends on your musical taste. I mean, it's not going to hurt you to do some odd meter stuff too, because the odd meter is not nearly as hard as you think it is, especially if there's a 4 in the bottom. Okay. So if we have 5/4, all we're doing is we're counting to 5 instead of 4. It's not that big of a deal. Instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, the only difference is now we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, and then starting over. So you can, and again, we're just thinking really simple. So if we're doing something where we're just taking 2 chords, okay? Hopefully you can hear that. And we're just going to go, here's in 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then C. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keeping that nice and even. Okay. And if you want to play that in 5/4, then we just add a 5th beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just by doing that, you're playing, advanced prog music. Okay. Now, of course, those musicians are probably going to do something more complex as quarter notes with that, but the same idea is there. And if we want to do 3/4, it's just we take a beat away. Just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the only one that might mess you up a little bit at first is if we mentioned 6/8. In 6/8, it's just that there's 3 things within each beat. Okay. So the 8 on the bottom is just telling you that the 8th note gets the beat. And then the 6 on top is telling you there's 6 beats in the measure. And then what's going to happen there is just, we're only going to tap our foot on the 1 and 4. So we're thinking like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And to me, those compound meters kind of make you want to sway when you're counting them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you get just those basic ideas down, it's so easy to build off of that once you have that. So 6/8 with those same chords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3. And then the big thing you can do too is, once you start understanding those basics, is in the music you like, as you're listening to it, guess what time signature it's in. So just really start tapping your foot and trying to count and do your best guess. It's okay to get stuff wrong in the beginning. Just the fact that you're trying and you're listening is the huge thing. I mean, I know Dylan's whole focus is on ear training, but learning to hear rhythms is a big part of ear training. So the more you can do that, and both these skills, both rhythm and ear training, is something you can definitely do away from your guitar. So it's not like you need to set aside a bunch of time of your guitar practice time to do this. You can do this anywhere. Maybe don't be clapping in the office, but you can, I always say, you can just tap your finger. It's still a beat. You can feel what's going on. Or you can, if you tap with your heel instead of the toe side of your foot, it's also a little bit quieter if you're doing something in an environment like that. But you can be practicing rhythm anywhere. So Do you give the similar type of advice to your students, Dylan?
Yeah, that's one of the big advantage of ear training and rhythm is a lot of things on the guitar, you need the guitar to practice. But with ear training and rhythm, you actually do not have to have the guitar to practice, which means that you can do this all the time. Even just when you're listening to music. One thing that I like to do is when I'm listening to music, it's just a habit now, is I always figure out the time signature. I listen to what beats the strumming patterns are on, what beats the chords are changing, right? So just like trying to listen to the rhythm of the music that you're doing is a way to train it. But you're right, is being a really good rhythm player and having an ear for rhythm go together. You really need both. You don't need to have an ear to where you're transcribing complex music and all this stuff, but when you're going to play quarter notes, you want to know how those quarter notes sound. Eighth notes, when you get into dots and subdivisions and all these different things, if you know how they sound, being able to play them and identify them in music makes things a lot easier. What do you have any tips or anything on how to be able to identify what time signature a song is actually in?
Yeah, well, if we're in 4/4, I mean, of course, drummers are very inventive, but the most basic thing you're listening for is you're going to hear the bass drum on 1 and 3 and the snare on 2 and 4. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Probably can't hear my foot, but it's tapping on 1 and
Yeah, you can hear it.
okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. You hear some variation of that, we're in 4. Okay, in 3, it's usually going to be like a strong beat on 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And then 6/8, I don't have an extra hand for a hi-hat.
Yeah.
But on that one, the bass is usually going to be on 1 and the snares be on 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Those are like the most basic ways you can think. But a lot of times I'm listening to the drummer because as a guitar player, we really are. We're locking with the drummer a lot. We're not just doing our own thing over the top. We've got to, I mean, when you're playing with others, you have to play as a unit. We're all working together. It's a team sport when you're playing music.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So it's
And
people who just kind of put their head down and play whatever and expect everyone else to adjust to them, and that's a mess.
exact. Only the drummer can do that. It is. You need to not only be able to play rhythms correctly yourself, but you need to be able to listen to other people that you're playing with and sometimes match them or do rhythms that accompany them. Being able to do that on the fly is really, really helpful too. But one thing that I know and you know is that if you are really good at rhythm and you really master rhythm or get decent, then learning songs becomes a lot easier. Can you explain why that is and what people can do to get to the point where learning songs does become a lot easier for them?
Yeah, well, a big part of it, like the space between chord changes, it's done for you. You just feel it. Okay, so making an outline of a song becomes really easy. And when you're learning anything, what you want to do is you start chunking things. Okay, so in the beginning, when you first start playing, you're looking at that G chord in isolation, and then you're like, oh man, there's a C chord coming up, and there's a D chord coming up, and after a while, you want to chunk it into like a whole verse section. And if you know that every single measure is in 4, you know what your basic strum is. That's a huge load off your plate right there. And then we can worry about what chord voicings we're using and things like that. So it makes learning everything so much easier. And if you're playing lead too, if you got your rhythm down, um, it's again, half the job's done for you. All right. The other half is then just making your fingers play the right notes over that rhythm. But if you're not feeling that rhythm, if you're not placing it right in time and in that groove, we're in trouble because no matter what you play, no matter how simple or complex and how fancy you think it's going to sound, it's not going to sound good unless you're feeling that exact thing. Okay. Um, Go ahead.
Sorry. But yeah, great, great. Yeah, half of it being done is definitely true because when you're trying to figure out songs, the first thing people focus on is what are the chords, what are the notes, and that kind of thing, and that's great. But the other half of it is if you know all of the right chords, you know all the right notes, the strumming pattern. Well, then you've got to know how to play that on time, when the chords change. All of the rhythm aspect is 50% or more of being able to play the song correctly. So if you can just listen and then know what the rhythm is, then learning that song becomes a lot faster, way faster. But one thing about this too is just like songs, just like chords, a lot of songs reuse the same chords over and over and over. And this is the same case for rhythm too. A lot of songs use the same rhythms over and over and over. Are there any like really common rhythm patterns or strumming patterns or things like this that people should be aware of or should practice?
Well, there's a lot, but yeah, one real basic. Well, the way I like to look at rhythm, just in general, as far as learning it, is I look at it as I just call them little mastery cells. Okay, so we already talked about the one, and that is, can you play a quarter note? That's taking up a beat. So essentially, my mastery cell we're talking about right now is just one beat. So we've already learned 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we go to the next subdivision. So we go to eighth notes. Can you now do this? It's and this is if you're thinking chord wise, it's where the pendulum strum comes in. And I'm going to go down, up. So it's down on the numbers and up on the ands if I'm thinking at the eighth note pulse. Okay. So I was thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay. So now I know what eighth notes in isolation sound like, and I know what quarter notes in isolation sound like. And now, if we're in the typical thing of 4/4, we've got 16 ways we can mix those up. Okay. So you can go ahead and just put like 4 lines on a piece of paper and write in any combination of those that you want. One of the most common is just going to be a quarter note at the beginning of a measure and then a series of eighth notes after that. So just 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 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 1. But any one of those 16 possible combinations is going to sound good in certain situations. And the best part about that is you really only had to learn 2 things and then how to combine them or how to integrate them to get all those different combinations. And in most pop music, that's going to get you through a lot of situations. Now we're going to probably decorate the rhythms a little bit by adding ties or root notes to it. Let's not make it that complex right now. So let's just pick a different rhythm. Let's just put quarter note on 1, eighth notes on 2, quarter note on 3, and eighth notes on 4. Another super common rhythm. So we got 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. We're doing the strumming type of thing. Again, the really big thing I'm doing here is to keep my rhythm easy, is my hands always just going, it's like a pendulum, just going down, up. Because if you play quarter notes, let me stand up for a second here so you can see this. If you're playing quarter notes, you're just going 1, 2, 3, 4, and your hands just naturally coming up here for that motion. So we just have to utilize that. So it's 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. So what you really need to do is just get used to missing on the up. Missing on the up is easy. It's missing on the down. We start adding in ties. That makes rhythm a little more difficult. But that's a great way just to get started. You're going to have so many strums because once you get those 16 down, some songs combine 2 of those. Okay. Because you're going to play through some of the variations and you're going to be like, oh, that one kind of stinks. Never going to use that. Until you combine it with another one and all of a sudden like, wait, that actually really makes sense and it's great. So never throw away any rhythm. You're not wasting time by doing stuff like this and just, writing stuff out on a piece of paper. What does this sound like? And apply it to any song too, because people get really obsessed as far as what is the actual strum pattern. What are they really playing here? And the answer is they kind of have a strum in mind, but unless it's like a really precise rhythm, which in the style music I'm talking about right now, it's more, there's going to be variations throughout the whole thing. And I know a lot of students, when they first come to me, get really obsessed. I've been looking at the tab and it says this and this measure and this measure. Okay, what is the overall feel that makes sense to you? Start there. And as you get really good at this, you're going to be able to put your own variations in on the fly. Okay, and it really frees you up just to play, but you're going to be in the style of, and it's going to work. So that's why I teach a lot of my students, and it works great for them. So do you do a similar thing, Dylan?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And the thing about songs is I see that a lot too, is people get really fixed on having every single down and up and just perfect. And the thing is, if that artist played that song again, the strumming would be different.
Mhm.
Not by a lot, but it'd be different slightly. Because the thing is, when you first start studying rhythm, let's just say chords and strumming patterns first, you focus on the quarters, you focus on even just down ups, down up, down up is like the most common strumming pattern. But as you get really comfortable with rhythm, then you start thinking less and less about that, and you actually can feel it because you have a deep understanding of the music. A lot of people will say, "Well, I don't understand the rhythm or anything like that. I just feel it." That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you have a deep understanding of it. You know when the beats are happening. You have a really good internal clock, and then you can just play and feel and strum when you want. Maybe the first time you played it, you hit on beat two. Maybe the second time you didn't for a little variation, and that's exactly what's going on in songs. Is rarely does one song have the exact same strumming the entire time. Usually it's based around the same strumming, but they have little variations with that. But when you're practicing rhythm and you're doing all of this, do you think you should always be practicing with a metronome? Or is it off and on? Should you start right away? What's your advice on using a metronome?
I like to work without a metronome first, just to see what I'm feeling. Like I have the basic understanding now. Okay, if I'm tapping my foot, I know what that quarter note is, and I also know what that eighth note is. One and two and three and. So I'm just going to play that a little bit on my own, just to see what I think it's supposed to be. Okay, and the metronome to me is that it's the thing that tests you. Okay, it's going to tell you right away whether what you are understanding right now is correct or not. So you definitely want to include the metronome, but don't, especially if you're just learning a concept or a new rhythm, it's okay to sit there and count and do what you think it is for a little while, just to start internalizing that feel and then start testing yourself. Because a lot of people just put the metronome right away, and that can be frustrating depending on what you're working on. So there's been some really advanced rhythms I've worked on throughout the years that I'll literally just walk around the house for like a week working on how I'm going to count it. And I like to add in clapping. You don't have to do that, but I like to clap the rhythm just to make it even more percussive. The big thing is that you can say it as you're tapping your foot in time, or at least what you're considering to be in time. Okay. The metronome is going to tell you how close you were, but just the act of doing that and clapping and counting and doing things like that throughout your day, when you add the metronome in, it's going to be much easier to line up on that. If you put in that work ahead of time doing that. So you need to work with a metronome, or drum machine is a little bit more fun. You can do either one, but the big thing is be willing to do that clapping and counting away from that as well, so that you're making sure you understand what you're supposed to be doing, and you're not relying on the metronome to keep time for you all the time. It's testing your ability to keep time yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big thing you just said there is the clapping. Is when you are struggling with a rhythm, then you need to just put the guitar down or stop playing and then be able to clap it. Because if you can't clap it, you absolutely cannot play it on the guitar correctly because it's going to be a lot harder when you actually pull up that guitar, you know. But yeah, I completely agree. When I'm practicing, and by the way, the metronome is not a beginner thing. It's not like you graduate out of the metronome. I still use a metronome to this day, but as Brian said, it's not all the time. It depends. It's off and on, but a metronome is absolutely something that will really develop that internal clock for you to where you can just listen to music, you know what the beat is, you can play. You know, but what are some ways with rhythm that we can use rhythm to be more creative? How can it help us come up with cooler ideas for strumming patterns, riffs, different things like that? How would you go about that?
Well, rhythms, it's just an endless well of ideas. I mean, I kind of alluded to it earlier. Um, don't have anything I can write on right now, else I'd show you on a piece of paper. But if we just take, again, hold on, I'll just grab it off my printer here. Let me draw something out for you real quick. See if you can see that. So we just have 4 lines, okay? You can fill those with anything you want. So again, our choices are right now See if that's in line again. Okay, we got that eighth or quarter. So since we can do two options in each one of those, there again, 16 variations right there. 16 is a lot of rhythmic variation, okay, just with these notes. We haven't added in triplets. We haven't added in sixteenths. We haven't added in ties. Rhythm is one of the things where you start looking at the possible combinations, it's endless, okay? That's why we play the same 12 notes with the same basic rhythms, but there's so many variations and combinations you can do within those that you're never going to run out of things you can do with it. I mean, this is like a lifelong thing. And with this, the big thing too is it's how you look at it. Are you looking at this as work? Because I hope not, because for me, this is a whole lot of fun, okay? Coming up with different rhythmic variations. And for those of you who like working with other people's songs, we talked a little bit about people being obsessed about playing songs the correct way. I like to do what I call either fixing people's songs, depending if what I come up with is better, or I call it ruining people's songs, which I've made it worse, but that's okay. It's part of the exercise of what does this new rhythm sound like? So again, with this idea, all you need to do is fill it in. So let's do just a different rhythm here. One I'm not going to like as much, and it's not going to be as common as the other one. So let's see if I can hold it up in the right spot this time. Nope. All right, so we have this, okay? So we got 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and. All right, so we have our new rhythm, and it doesn't matter what song we're playing. We're just going to do a GCD this time. 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and. Okay, and what if we combine that with one of those earlier ones? All right, what if we go 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. Okay, just by doing that little combination, I've made it a whole lot more interesting, at least to me. I like that way better than that particular one in isolation. And again, with those 16, now that we're combining 16 times, I forget, it's a big number, okay? I'm not a math guy. If I had a calculator right now, I could tell you what that is. But we're essentially, whatever 16 times 16 is, we've got that many options as far as, I think it's like 244 or something like that, that we can do, okay? So that's just, it's super easy to be creative with rhythm. And that can work for a riff, it can work for soloing. I mean, what if we practice our pentatonic scale with that rhythm? What if we just went 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and, okay? It's already more musical just by adding rhythm to it. It's no longer just an exercise. Now we're starting to make music with it. And these are just super simple ideas. And then with of course, we can always decorate things too. Okay, what I mean by that is, what if I started adding some roots in there? Okay, so let's just say we add roots on, we'll go back to that first strum where it's just 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. Very country in sound, but. Okay, now we're keeping rhythm. Our picks got to be more accurate, but now I've added some more interest. Well, if we go to that other one, let's put a tie between beats 2 and 3. Putting a tie between beats 2 and 3 is a super common thing to do. So just, it's going to be a down, down, up, down, up, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. And the important thing there is on the beginning of beat 3, we're still making that down motion. So I always call it practicing air guitar, okay? So let me stand up again so you can see that, but it's just 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and you start adding in ties and things like that. Now the amount of rhythms we're able to play has just compounded again by a lot, and you're never going to run out of things that you can do with this. And again, up to this point, we've only talked about quarter notes and eighth notes. So we start adding in triplets, 16th notes, and things like that, and your possibilities are endless. Now, a little thing with 16th notes is this. The rules change a little bit. When we're thinking with that pendulum strum, we're doing 1 and 2 and 3. That's as fast as our hand ever has to move. We're doing eighth notes. With 16th notes, we have to get 4 motions. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. So now the thing that messes some people up is the eighth note now becomes a double downstroke. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4 and 1 E and a 2 and we slow it down 1 E and a 2 and. So my hand's just always making those 4 motions to complete that 16th note. And that works great for strumming stuff. If you're into like more metal and things like that, we're probably not going to use that as much, but it's just a great way for most people, especially those, what I call campfire strummers, those guys who just like to play the popular songs and possibly sing with their friends. That's going to get you through so many situations, just knowing those basic techniques and knowing how to count these basic rhythms. Endless songs, thousands of songs you can play with just what we're talking about right now. So anything to add to that, Dylan?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Yeah, the amount of rhythms that you can create with just quarter notes and eighth notes is insane. But then adding on the sixteenths and the triplets and all this stuff, what I like to do, and I have a lot of students do, is when you're trying to be creative and come up with stuff, try to create with your pencil first, meaning write down a rhythm that you think is interesting. Because if you pick up the guitar and then try to play, then a lot of the times you're going to come up with stuff that you've already played before or not that different because you're relying on the muscle memory of your fingers and what you usually do. Of course, picking up your guitar and trying to write is not a bad thing, but this is just a little hack to try to get some new ideas, is to just write down some rhythms that you think would be cool and then try to play it. And then see how that sounds. And then try to add a little 16th note, add a triplet. If you're unsure of how to create a rhythm in 4/4, 6/8, or anything, Brian has an excellent course in rhythm that I highly recommend. But writing this stuff down and then being able to play it. And then, two, you can think of this as not even just being creative. You could think of it as just, okay, I want to practice rhythm. So write out 10 different rhythms and then just see if you can play them. And if that's easy, then try to make it harder. Try to change the time signature. Try to do odd meters like Brian was talking about before and so on. And this stuff will help you a lot. Now, there's one challenge that I think every guitar player encounters eventually, at least I did, is when I was first learning, I got to the point where playing to a metronome was extremely easy. Playing to a song was extremely easy. Staying on time by myself was extremely easy. But when it came to playing with a band, all of the sudden it seemed like staying on time and being on the beat perfectly became a lot harder. What do you think? Why do you think that is for most people? Or what do you think are some of the biggest rhythm challenges guitarists face when they are playing in a band?
Okay, number one, how good were your other band members?
Yes. let's assume the band members are good, and the problem is just the guitar player.
The guitar player, okay.
Yeah.
Then my advice for you there is start playing less and listen more. Okay, so many people, again, they put their head down and they're so worried about what their part is that you're not listening. You're not using the drummer as a metronome. You're not working as a team. You're trying to cram your part in there, and whatever tempo you feel comfortable playing it at, you're playing that, okay? You have to be all feeling the same tempo. I know we're in trouble if I ever look around and I'm playing with a group of guys and someone's foot is not tapping, the same way everybody else's is. I've found a problem spot in the band usually. Now, occasionally someone's tapping their foot in halftime, which just means 1, 2, 3, 4. That's acceptable. That's another way of playing in time. As long as I'm seeing we're matching up on some downbeats. We're all good. But the thing is, it's okay to simplify things, especially as you add more instruments in. As a guitar player, you can play a whole lot less. And completely different subject here, getting off a rhythm. But so many people, too, obsess over learning bar chords. And once you get into a band, if you know what triads and things like that are, it frees you up to play a whole lot more and not have you playing these big chunky chords. But to me, that is always the answer, is if things are going wrong and you can feel that it's not grooving right, maybe make eye contact. Okay. Because again, we're working as a team, and someone in the team it's not gelling. It's not working together. And the best thing you can do is start by playing less. Okay. Take some of your part away until you figure out where that downbeat's at, how you're locking in, then you can start adding it back in a little bit. And the more you practice that way, you're going to be able to play your part and not really think so much. A lot of it has to come down to, have you practiced enough that you're not thinking? Are you on autopilot? Okay. If you're still in that thinking stage, then you're not able to give everyone else your full attention, and you're too obsessed about your own part. So it could be just go back to the woodshed and practice your part a little bit more too. And then as far as playing in a band too, can you, a little thing I'll do there, can you make an outline of the song? Do you know the exact structure? Because again, every little thing that you can take off your table as far as having to think and just play and enjoy the experience is going to make it so much better. But thinking is the thing that always gets in the way. So that's why you want to practice rhythm to the point where it's just down and we're not ever counting live unless we absolutely have to.
Yes, the best thing you said there was just play less. It's such simple advice, and it's exactly what people should do. If you're trying to play something complicated, or even if it's not complicated, but it's still off time, just play less. Can you hit it on beat one? Can you hit two beats on time, and so on? Just taking it from that perspective really helps. I think a big thing too is when playing in a band is to take a deep breath. Because a lot of the times you get that, especially when you're going to perform an actual show, when other people are going to be watching you, it's really easy to speed up because you're excited, you're nervous, the adrenaline's pumping. So just taking a deep breath and calming down and slowing down, at least this was my issue, is just forgetting the rhythm and just trying to play, without communicating with the band and listening to the band. That's really, really where you get off. And yeah, when you're playing with a group of people and you notice one person is tapping their foot off beat, that is a really scary moment. And a really uncomfortable conversation's coming soon.
What song are you listening to? Because it's not the one we're playing.
Exactly. I'm like, oh my goodness. But yeah, and two, knowing the structure, taking away a lot of things that are clouding your brain. If you don't have memorized how many times do I play the verse progression, how many times does the chorus happen, when is the breaks, when does the bridge happen, right? All these different things. If you don't have that down, then that is going to take up space in your brain, and it's going to leave less time for you to think about the rhythm and staying on time. So knowing all of this is going to help you with your rhythm. And a lot of times that's the case too, is people have the rhythm, they can play on time, but they have all of these other things they're trying to think about. So if you just remove that, then majority of the time people can play on rhythm no problem. It's just a lot of the things like, how do I do this chord change? How can I, when is the verse happening? All these different things really cloud people's mind. But one thing too you were talking about earlier, and this relates to playing in a band, but when people are studying how to become a great improviser, how to solo really well, they focus on speed, they focus on their pick directions, they focus on learning a lot of new licks, scales, all these different things. But rarely do you hear lead guitar players talking about how they're practicing rhythm. Do you think practicing rhythm is an important thing for someone wanting to improve their guitar solos? And if so, how should they go about it? Is it any different to just being a normal rhythm player when you're trying to apply this to lead? What do you think?
It's really no different. I mean, what you're going to do is, again, start with your pencil, write down a rhythm, okay? And then a little game you can play. Now, you're probably never going to play the solo live, but how many phrases can you come up with of that one rhythm, okay? And can you come up with 10, 15 phrases from that one rhythm, and maybe even limit yourself on the amount of notes you can play, okay? So now we've got to think, am I going to bend? Am I going to slide? We're getting a little bit out of our realm here as far as thinking just rhythm to ear training, but these are all the things that will make you a much better musician, is thinking with these phrasing elements. And then what you can do is come up with a second rhythm, okay? And they don't have to be long. I would say start with a measure, and probably not even fill the full measure. I would definitely put some rests in there, okay? Or at least some longer held notes, because the more you do that, just the more catchy melodic your lead is going to be. You don't always have to fill everything with flashy 16th notes. That's very appropriate sometimes in some styles of music. That happens a lot more than others. But if you want people to really remember what you're doing, maybe start with, a dotted half note gets 3 beats, and then put 2 eighth notes at the end. And that's a pretty catchy little rhythm right there. And then on top of that, as far as lead playing, you also want to be focusing on chord tones a lot. Not always. I mean, as you advance as a player and things get more acceptable to your ear, now getting more into Dylan's big realm here of ear training, the more you get used to singing and hearing certain pitches, you'll be able to play a lot more and sell it to people and have them believe that it's the right thing for you to be playing as well. But a great place to start is on those long held notes. Just play a chord tone, okay? And then fill in the two faster notes with something else, and then make sure whatever the next chord is, or if it's the same chord, you're landing on a chord tone for a while. And that type of practice is going to make your lead playing just so much better, just doing something simple like that. So do you have any exercises you like to do with your students, Dylan?
Yeah, I love just having people write rhythms and then mixing different time signatures and stuff, and then just playing it. If this is specifically for guitar soloing, just playing it with one note, and then just seeing how the rhythm sounds, and then adding another note, and then adding another note, and kind of building up that way to where the focus is primarily on the rhythm, and the notes are the secondary thought. And you usually come up with some really cool stuff that you've never done before, but studying rhythm is not a specific style of playing. It's just rhythm. And the rhythm, when you really understand it, rhythm is something that you can apply anywhere. You can apply it to chords, to strumming, to lead, to riffs. It's just a cool rhythm. So what you could even do is if you hear a cool strumming pattern, figure out what the rhythm of that is, and then apply that same rhythm to a guitar solo or a riff. It's a really cool thing when you understand the principle, you can apply it anywhere. Another cool thing too is our immediate thing to go to is we always start on the one. This is a common thing to do. And the reason we do this is because it's very strong and solid. But you don't want that sound, that strong sound all the time. It's cool to mix it up. So coming in on the and of one or two or the and of two kind of gives you an unexpected sound in strumming, in guitar solos and riffs and anything, right? But the same thing is true for that is you don't always want that either. You want a nice mix of all these different things. But how can someone start training their dynamics in rhythm where they're able to get louder, quieter, accent certain beats? Do you have any particular exercises you have people go through to get dynamics down?
Yeah, we can do, like, if we're talking about gradual, then it's just a matter of, take one strum pattern and just start as light as you possibly can. I probably started lighter than I'm normally going to play, and towards the end there I started getting probably heavier than I'm going to play in most situations. But it's just you want to practice. You're keeping a steady rhythm, and you're just getting gradually louder. You can also get gradually softer. As far as accenting, again, put it on paper first. I guess that's the theme of this: is put it on paper first. Okay, if you do that, it's so much easier. You're not just having to randomly think of things in your head. So let's say all of a sudden I decided I want beat 3 to be louder than everything else. Okay. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3. Now, first thing where I kind of messed up in the beginning there is when I know I want something to be louder, start off softer with everything else. Okay. So let's try that again. So you got 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3. And now when I hit that 3, or if I'm thinking with power chords, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3. And there with power chords and that style of music, you can also get that same effect by palm muting everything else around it, and then just lifting that palm mute on that note too, which we're getting into another technique. But it's all things based around that rhythm and just piling techniques and different things you can do on top of that, and you're never going to run out of cool things to play. So what exercises do you like to do with your students, Dylan?
Pretty much the same thing. Is I like to first go through rhythms that they already are really good with, and then we just start changing the accent. It's like, all right, first let's have the accent be on beat 1. Great. Let's have the accent be on beat 2. And then it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. Accent on the and of 4, accent on the E of 2. different things like that. But the key too, like you said, is the theme of today is write it down first, because it's so much easier to look at it as opposed to trying to just think about it. And also, again, you can come up with some cool stuff, but you just write the rhythm and then you choose where it's that accent is going to be. And then you can also do the crescendos or decrescendo where you're gradually getting louder, or you're starting out really loud and you're gradually getting quieter. All of these things is what really makes it sound like music to me, is when I see a beginner player or even a low intermediate player, early intermediate, is the dynamics are always the same. They might fluctuate a little bit, but they're always the same. And that's why a lot of people's guitar solos can sound kind of stale and boring and they don't know why. Because the whole point of it is just try to make it sound human. So when you're taking a guitar solo or chords as well, if you want it to really sound like music, to really sound human, well, when we talk, we don't have the same level the whole time. If we did, we'd all be speaking monotone, and no one likes listening to anyone that speaks in a monotone voice. So being able to vary those dynamics is really, really important. And this kind of relates to ear training too, is next time when you're listening to music, try to listen out for this. When is it getting louder? When is it getting quieter? All these different things will really, really help. But that leads me to my next question is syncopation. This is something that a lot of people don't know what that is when people say it. It's a common word in music, but could you just explain what syncopation is and maybe how to train it a little bit?
Yes, not playing on the expected beats, I guess is my very broad example of that. So an easy thing, again, let's just start by adding ties in, okay? So when we added that tie in between the and of beat 2 and the downbeat of 3, we're adding syncopation there, okay? So 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and that makes it way more interesting. Okay, now on that same idea, we could also then, if we add a chord change into something like that, we could anticipate the chord and make that a syncopated chord change as well. So like 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. And getting that on the up where you're not expecting that beat to happen is just a great place to start. So syncopation you can do, and then once you get between 2 and 3 is probably the most common place to do that. You can do that between any beat. And again, since we're talking about putting things on paper, once you have a rhythm on paper, what I like to have people do is start between beats 2 and 3. What does it sound like with syncopation there? Let's do that same rhythm. Now I'm going to put syncopation between 1 and 2. So it was a quarter note going to those 2 eighth notes. So now I have to skip that first part of that eighth note. So now it's 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. Brand new rhythm just by adding that syncopation in. Now let's go ahead and move it over to 3 and 4, okay? So now I'm going to be playing on the and with 3, but not the downbeat of 4. 1, 2, and 3, and I forgot what I just said. Let's start that again. 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. This is where it's helpful to have it on a piece of paper. Okay, I had to think about it there. And then from there, you could even start adding in 2 ties. I'm going to put the tie between beats 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. Okay, so now it's 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and all this is just done with that very first rhythm that I played, which was a quarter note instead of eighth notes, eighth notes, eighth notes. Okay, and there's so many variations you can do just on that one idea, thinking with dynamics, thinking with adding syncopation or ties in there. We haven't even talked about adding rests. It's okay to add space in there too. That's another fun one, is just take a beat and take it away, or take half a beat and take it away. So many different things and variations you can do on just one rhythm. You could easily spend a week coming up with variations on just that one. Not that you have to do that unless you find it fun like I do. But there's so many different things you can do. So anything you have to expand on that idea, Dylan?
Yeah, no, that's excellent. It's when you were talking about the rests, it's really just don't play is what a rest is. Be quiet. And it's surprising how hard that can actually become. When you start adding rests in the middle, at the end, or even in the beginning, being able to perfectly be quiet for the right amount of time and then come in can be a tricky thing. And that kind of leads to the next question is if someone is trying to get a rhythm down that is really complex, that's like prog metal or has some weird odd meters or is changing time signatures, has a lot of rests and subdivisions, how would you go about having someone really break that down and learn it?
Okay, well, first thing we're doing is we're putting down the guitar. Okay, and we're going to figure out exactly how to count it. If it's odd time signatures, a lot of times we're not tapping our foot. So on 1, 2, 3, 4, things like that. Often you're going to divide things into threes and twos is a great way to think of it. And as soon as I start doing that, there's a good chance. A lot of stuff is situational, but if it's more prog sounding music, I'm probably going to adjust my foot to tap on those strong accents. Okay. So it could be, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then having go back into 4, 4, something like that. But we need to have a way of feeling the time, again, finding a way to tap our foot, and then finding a way to count it. And you're going to do that until it starts feeling comfortable. And then at that point, I take it to my guitar, and I'm probably playing with one note or maybe a chord if it's a strum. I'm not worried about playing everything. Okay. Can I feel that first? And then I start adding in little bits and pieces, and everything is builds on each other. Unfortunately, most people try to start here and work on everything at the same time, and that's why you're so frustrated. What you need to do is start thinking in layers. What's the easiest thing I can do with this? And then what's the next little layer I can add? What's the next little layer I can add? And before you know it, you're up here. But if you start up there, it's going to take you much longer than if you start thinking in this layered approach of practicing.
Yeah, it's excellent. It's just really just breaking it down, just going through it bit by bit, like you're saying. What I like to do is if it's a really complicated rhythm and it's really long, then I'll divide them first into sections, like really, really small sections. Like maybe it only has 5 notes or 5 rhythmic notes or whatever. And then I just take each section one at a time. Can I play the first thing once? Then can I play the first 2 beats, then the first 3 beats, then the first 4 beats? And if you take it systematically like this, it feels like it's going to take longer, but it actually doesn't at all. We have this common, I think, tendency as humans to just want to complete things. So we want that instant gratification of being able to do it. So we want to take the whole rhythm or big parts of it and just be able to play it at once. And you keep doing that over and over and over, and it just doesn't work. So breaking it up, taking it one by one is really helpful. But Brian, you've given us a ton of excellent exercises and things. Do you have any final tips or anything for us on rhythm or how we can improve?
Just the best thing you could possibly do is just practice your rhythm every day. It's going to make everything you play sound so much better. And even what Dylan said at the end there, as far as his approach, it's the rhythm mastery cell thing. So he mastered whatever that rhythm was on beat 1, and then he mastered that rhythm on beat 2, and then he worked on combining them. Okay. Then he worked between 2 and 3, worked on combining those. If you just take that approach, there's no rhythm that you can't play. But you have to be patient with yourself. You have to go through the process. And the best part is the next time you run into that rhythm, it's you have it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same as ear training. Once you know what an interval sounds like, or you know what a major chord or minor chord sounds like, it's there. It's there for life.
Exactly. There's no rhythm you can't play. It's excellent. As long as you break it down. Well,
Yeah.
Brian, thank you so much. I think you have something for everybody that you're giving away today. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Do you have the graphic for that or not?
I do.
Okay. Yes. It's just 6 easy steps to learn and play any rhythm with perfect timing. And this just takes you through a lot of the steps we just talked about today. It's a video. I take a rhythm and I guide you through each step in the process. And there's a few things in there that we didn't cover today as far as how to be even more creative with rhythm. That's another step once you get things down. And it's free. So just pick up your copy today and check it out. It's going to be helpful for you.
Awesome. Thank you. And I have something for you guys too. I've got a free video here on the 5 easy ways to practice ear training. So part of being really good at rhythm is having a good ear and being able to identify stuff by ear. And that falls into rhythm, being able to identify different rhythms. So this is a completely free thing that you can download, and it can start giving you some exercises on how to train your ear. I put both of those links in the comments, and it'll also be in the description on the YouTube video and Facebook and everything, so you have them. So go there, download it. But Brian, thank you so much for today. Really appreciate it. Everyone who's watching, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next time.